On Father's Day, my wife and her daughter gave me a mug that said, "World's biggest disappointment." They all laughed. I smiled, said thanks, and cleaned the dishes. That night, I packed my bags. 2 weeks later, my wife posted, "Please, if anyone knows where he is, tell him we just want him home." Look, I'm not the kind of guy who wakes up on Father's Day expecting a parade or anything, but maybe, just maybe, I thought I'd get something better than becoming the punchline to a joke I didn't even know was being written. But that's exactly what happened, and honestly, I should have seen it coming from a mile away. It was one of those perfect June mornings where the sun's streaming through the kitchen windows like it's auditioning for a Folgers commercial, and I'm shuffling down the hallway in my ratty plaid pajama pants thinking maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Maybe today I'd actually feel like part of this family instead of the guy who pays the mortgage and occasionally gets acknowledged when the lawn needs mowing or the garbage disposal starts making that demon possession sound again. The kitchen was already buzzing when I walked in. My wife Lydia was there with her signature coffee mug, the one that says, "But first, coffee," like she's the most relatable human being on the planet, and her daughter Madison was perched on the counter like she owned the place. Which, let's be honest, she basically did. My stepson Eli was hovering near the doorway with his phone out, and I noticed he had that look on his face, the one where he's trying real hard not to crack up about something. I figured they were watching some TikTok or whatever the kids are into these days. Probably something involving someone falling off a skateboard or a cat knocking stuff off a table. You know, normal internet stuff. "Happy Father's Day." Lydia practically sang it, her voice hitting that octave that women use when they're either genuinely excited or about to tell you they backed the car into the mailbox again. She was holding this box, not wrapped, just a plain cardboard box like something you'd get from Amazon. And she had this huge grin plastered across her face like she'd just discovered the cure for boredom. I should have known right then. That grin was too big, too excited. The kind of grin that means trouble is wearing a party hat and waiting to jump out from behind the furniture. "Open it, open it." Madison was practically bouncing, her phone also out now, because apparently, this moment needed to be documented for posterity. Or Instagram. Same difference these days. I took the box because, what else was I gonna do? Refuse? Tell them I had a bad feeling about this? Nah, that would have made me look paranoid and ungrateful, and I'd already been labeled as too sensitive enough times in this house to last me 3 lifetimes. So I opened it, peeling back the cardboard flaps like I was defusing a bomb, which, in retrospect, would have been less emotionally destructive. Inside, nestled in some tissue paper like it was precious cargo, was a mug. Just a plain white ceramic mug. For a split second, I thought maybe it would say something normal, something that wouldn't make me want to crawl into said mug and disappear. World's best stepdad would have been fine. Dad would have been great. Hell, even world's okayest father figure would have gotten a genuine laugh out of me. But no, what it said in big, bold, impossible to ignore letters was, "World's biggest disappointment." I stood there, holding this mug like it was evidence in a murder trial, my own emotional murder, specifically, and I waited for the punchline. You know, the part where someone says, "Just kidding, here's your real gift." But that moment never came. Instead, what came was laughter. Not just giggles or chuckles, but full-on, doubled over, can't breathe laughter. Lydia was wiping tears from her eyes. Madison was slapping the counter. Eli, to his credit, looked slightly uncomfortable, but he was still filming, still capturing every second of my public humiliation for whatever group chat or social media platform they decided was worthy of witnessing my degradation. "Oh my God, your face." Lydia managed to gasp between laughs. "I told you he'd be shocked. It's hilarious, right?" Madison added, like she was waiting for me to confirm that yes, this was indeed the pinnacle of comedy, and I should be grateful to be roasted alive on Father's Day of all days. I felt my face doing that thing where it tries to decide between crying and rage-quitting life, but instead, it settled on something worse, a smile. A big, fake, my face might actually crack from the effort smile. Because that's what I did in this house. I smiled. I went along with it. I was the good sport, the guy who could take a joke, the human punching bag who always came back for more because, hey, at least they were paying attention to me, right? "Thanks," I said, and I even managed to throw in a little laugh that sounded like someone was strangling a whoopee cushion. I've always wanted my self-esteem in ceramic form. Really, this is perfect. I'll cherish it forever. That made them laugh even harder, because of course it did. Nothing funnier than a guy making jokes about his own roasting, right? It's like when you laugh at yourself, it gives everyone else permission to laugh twice as hard. It's this weird psychological loophole that basically means you're doing their job for them. Lydia came over and patted my shoulder like I was a golden retriever who'd just learned a new trick. See? I knew you'd get it. You always have such a good sense of humor about things. Yeah, a good sense of humor. That's what we're calling it now. Not slowly dying inside, while maintaining a socially acceptable facade. Not swallowing anger and humiliation like they're daily vitamins. Nope, just a good sense of humor. That's me. Jack Harris, comedian extraordinaire, laughing at jokes where he's the punchline and the setup and the entire goddamn premise. I set the mug down on the counter, carefully, because wouldn't want to break it, that would be rude, and noticed there was breakfast already laid out. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, the whole 9 yards. Except none of it was for me. They'd already eaten. The dishes were piled in the sink, crusty with syrup and egg residue, and I could see the empty orange juice carton sitting on the counter like a tombstone for my expectations. "Oh, we already ate," Lydia said, following my gaze. "We thought you'd sleep in longer. But hey, feel free to make yourself something. Feel free. Like it was a privilege. Like I should be grateful for the opportunity to cook my own Father's Day breakfast after being presented with a mug that basically screamed, 'You suck,' in ceramic form." "No problem," I said, still smiling, still playing the role I'd been cast in without auditioning. "I'll just clean these up first." And I did. I stood there at that sink, scrubbing dried pancake batter off plates while they migrated to the living room, their laughter fading into the background hum of the TV. I scrubbed until my hands were pruny and the water ran cold, and I thought about all the Father's Days that had come before this one. The ties I'd gotten that I never wore. The best dad, cards that felt hollow because I wasn't really their dad, was I? I was Lydia's husband, Madison and Eli's mom's husband. The guy who signed permission slips and showed up to recitals and helped with homework, but never quite made it into the inner circle. But this was different. This wasn't just forgetting or being thoughtless. This was intentional. This was planned. They'd gone to a store, or ordered it online, more likely, and they'd specifically chosen a mug that said, "World's biggest disappointment," and they'd thought, "Yeah, this is perfect for Jack. This is exactly how we see him." I dried my hands on the dish towel that said, "Home is where the heart is." Ironic, considering my heart was currently being shredded like documents at a scandal-ridden corporation, and I made a decision. Not a dramatic one. Not a throw the mug through the window, storm out in a blaze of glory kind of decision. Just a quiet one. A simple one. I was done. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, after I'd smiled through dinner, after I'd laughed at Madison's story about some guy at school, after I'd said goodnight like everything was normal, I packed a bag. Not everything. Just the essentials. 2 shirts, some jeans, underwear, socks. My toolbox from the garage, because a man doesn't go anywhere without his tools. And that last little shred of dignity I'd been hoarding like a dragon guarding treasure. I didn't leave a note. Didn't write some long explanation about feelings or boundaries or emotional abuse wrapped in jokes. What would have been the point? They'd either get it or they wouldn't, and based on the events of the day, I was betting heavily on wouldn't. I just walked out the front door with my duffel bag and my toolbox, got in my car, and drove. No dramatic music. No perfectly timed rain. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the growing distance between myself and a house that had stopped feeling like home somewhere between "I do" and "world's biggest disappointment." Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being the joke. Eventually, you realize you don't have to stay for the punchline. You can just leave. Walk out mid-setup. Unsubscribe from the whole damn show. And that's exactly what I did. You know what's funny about leaving? And I mean really leaving, not just threatening to leave while you're standing in the driveway having a meltdown that the neighbors will definitely discuss at their next book club meeting. It's that nobody actually expects you to do it quietly. Everyone's got this script in their head about how these things are supposed to go down. There's supposed to be yelling, door slamming. Maybe someone throws a lamp or drives their car through the garage door. Very Lifetime movie network. Very theatrical. But me? I went full ghost mode. No dramatic monologue about how they'd ruined me. No, You'll regret this when I'm gone. Speech delivered from the doorway while thunder crashes in the background. I didn't even leave a sticky note on the fridge. Just pure, unfiltered silence. The kind of silence that's somehow louder than any argument could ever be. I ended up at this motel off Route 18 called the Silver Rest Inn, which was the kind of name that promised way more than it delivered. It should have been called the Rust and Regret Motel, or maybe the Please Don't Look Under the Beds Inn, because that would have been more accurate advertising. 49 bucks a night, and for that premium price, you got paper-thin walls, a TV that only got 3 channels, all of them showing infomercials for products that looked like they'd been invented by someone having a fever dream, and complimentary roaches that scurried across the bathroom floor like they were late for a very important meeting. The guy at the front desk didn't even look up when I checked in, just slid me a key attached to a piece of plastic with the room number written in Sharpie and went back to watching what appeared to be a documentary about UFOs. I appreciated that, honestly. No questions. No rough night, buddy. No concerned looks. Just business. Cold, impersonal, beautiful business. Room 12 was exactly what you'd expect from a $49 a night establishment. One bed that sagged in the middle like it had given up on life years ago. A nightstand with a lamp that flickered like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. A painting of a boat on the wall that was somehow both boring and unsettling at the same time, like the boat knew something I didn't and wasn't planning to share. The carpet was that specific pattern that exists solely in cheap motels and casinos, designed to hide stains and the sins of previous occupants. I dropped my bag on the bed and just stood there for a minute, listening to the sounds of the place. Someone was having an argument 3 doors down. A couple, from the sound of it, really going at it about whose turn it was to buy groceries. Above me, someone was either moving furniture or practicing their wrestling moves. The ice machine down the hall made this grinding noise every few minutes that sounded like a robot dying slowly. This was my life now. This was what I'd chosen, or what had been chosen for me. The line between those two things was getting pretty blurry. I lay down on that sad excuse for a mattress and stared at the popcorn ceiling, counting the stains and wondering about their origin stories. That one probably came from a leak. That one looked like someone had thrown something. That one was shaped like Florida, which felt appropriate since this whole situation was about as chaotic and unpredictable as that entire state. The thing about leaving, really leaving, is that nobody prepares you for the aftermath. Not the legal stuff or the logistics, but the mental part. The part where you lie in a crappy motel room and wonder when exactly your family stopped being your family and started being an audience that applauded every time you tripped over your own dignity. Was it gradual? Did I miss the signs? Or did it happen all at once, and I was just too busy being the good sport to notice? I spent that first week in a fog. I'd wake up, stare at the ceiling until the maid knocked and asked if I wanted housekeeping. I didn't, because letting a stranger see how pathetic my temporary living situation was felt like adding insult to injury. And then I'd shuffle down to the convenience store on the corner for coffee that tasted like it had been brewed in a tire, and maybe a breakfast burrito that was definitely older than it should have been but cost $2. So who was I to complain? My phone stayed off. I wasn't ready for the barrage of texts and calls that I knew would come eventually. The "where are you?" messages that would be less about concern and more about inconvenience. Because that's what I was, right? An inconvenience. The guy who paid bills and fixed things, but had the audacity to have feelings about being publicly humiliated. 2 weeks. That's how long it took. I finally turned my phone on because I needed to check my bank account. Poverty waits for no man's emotional breakdown. And that's when I saw it. 17 missed calls from Lydia. 34 text messages. And then, because apparently private communication wasn't dramatic enough, a Facebook post that had been up for 3 days and already had 200 comments. I shouldn't have looked. I knew I shouldn't have looked. It was like knowing there's a horror movie on TV and you shouldn't watch it before bed, but you do it anyway because apparently you hate yourself. So I clicked on Lydia's profile, and there it was, pinned to the top of her page like a missing persons poster. Please, if anyone knows where he is, tell him we just want him home. We love him and miss him so much. Jack, if you're reading this, we're sorry. Please come back. The kids are devastated. And attached to this heartfelt plea? A photo of me. Not a recent photo, mind you. No, this was from 2 summers ago at the neighborhood barbecue, where I'm holding a grill spatula like I'm King Arthur pulling Excalibur from the stone, wearing an apron that says Grill Sergeant, and smiling like I'd just won the lottery. I looked happy in that photo. I looked like a guy who belonged somewhere. The comments section was exactly what you'd expect from Facebook, a toxic blend of genuine concern and people who just wanted to be part of the drama. Sandra from Lydia's Pilates class, praying for you, hun. He'll come back when he's ready. Kevin from my old job. Bro, wherever you are, just know we're thinking about you. Lydia's sister Diane, who never liked me anyway. Some people just can't handle commitment. Stay strong, sis. Not one of them knew. Not one single person in that comment section had any clue that Lydia had given me a mug that might as well have been a certificate of emotional abuse. That Madison had filmed my humiliation like it was content for her Instagram story. That I'd spent Father's Day scrubbing their dirty dishes while they laughed about how funny it was to crush whatever was left of my self-respect. But here's what really got me. The thing that made me actually laugh out loud in that depressing motel room, scaring away one of my roach roommates. She'd said the kids were devastated. The same kids who'd thought world's biggest disappointment was comedy gold. The same kids who'd gone about their day after I left like nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had happened. I was just the guy who was there, and then wasn't, and maybe they'd notice when something needed fixing or someone needed to play ATM. I sat there on that sagging mattress, phone in hand, and I had this moment of clarity. You know those moments where everything suddenly makes sense, and you can see the whole picture instead of just the tiny corner you've been staring at for years? Yeah, one of those. None of them actually wanted me home. What they wanted was the idea of me home. They wanted the guy who paid the mortgage and didn't complain. That was the first thing I'd gotten right in years. If you've never had the privilege of living in a budget motel for an extended period of time, let me paint you a picture. Actually, scratch that. Let me give you the full sensory experience, because this place assaulted all 5 senses with the enthusiasm of a door-to-door salesman who won't take no for an answer. The smell hit you first. It was this unique combination of industrial cleaning products, cigarette smoke from 1987, and something I can only describe as despair with notes of mildew. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes and follows you around like a ghost that's really committed to haunting you. I went through an entire bottle of Febreze in the first 3 days, and it didn't make a dent. That smell was permanent. It was part of the infrastructure now, probably load-bearing at this point. The Silver Rest Inn had this aesthetic that I like to call given up. The carpet, which I mentioned before but deserves another shout-out for being spectacularly hideous, was this brown and orange pattern that looked like someone had asked an AI to design the 1970s, but make it sad. There were stains on that carpet that probably had their own zip codes. I made a rule early on, never walk barefoot. Never. I wore shoes at all times, even to go from the bed to the bathroom, which was exactly 7 steps, but felt like a journey through a hazmat zone. The bathroom itself was a whole other adventure. The tiles were that specific shade of off-white that suggested they'd started out as actual white about 30 years ago and had slowly given up on life. The grout was basically black at this point, and I'm pretty sure the shower curtain was the same one that had been there when the place opened in what I'm guessing was 1973. It had this pattern of ducks on it, but the ducks looked angry, like they knew they'd been stuck in this bathroom for decades and were plotting revenge. The shower had 2 settings, scalding hot or ice cold. No in between. No comfortable temperature that won't cause 3rd-degree burns or hypothermia. You had to pick your torture method every morning. I usually went with scalding because at least that woke me up, though I'm pretty sure I lost a few layers of skin in the process. But the real stars of the Silver Rest Inn? The vending machines. There were 2 of them, positioned right outside the lobby like sentries guarding the entrance to disappointment. One allegedly sold snacks, the other allegedly sold drinks. I say allegedly because these machines operated on some kind of chaotic neutral alignment where sometimes they'd give you what you paid for, and sometimes they'd just take your money and laugh at you. Well, not literally laugh, though given everything else about this place, I wouldn't have been surprised if they did. My first week there, I lost $1 to the snack machine. I pressed B4, which should have given me a bag of Doritos, the Cool Ranch kind that I'd been craving, and the machine made this grinding noise like it was thinking really hard about my request. Then nothing. The spiral thing turned. The chips moved forward about half an inch, and then just stopped. Hung there, taunting me. I could see them through the glass, so close but so far, like some kind of philosophical metaphor about life that I wasn't in the mood to appreciate. I did what any reasonable person would do. I shook the machine, gently at first, then with increasing aggression, until the guy from the front desk, different guy than the UFO documentary enthusiast, this one was watching what appeared to be a cooking show, yelled out, "Machine's broken. Has been for months. Then why is it still here?" I yelled back, "Owner says it's too expensive to fix or remove." Perfect. That was just perfect. Even the vending machines at this place were giving up on life. The TV in my room became my best friend out of sheer necessity. It only got 3 channels, like I mentioned, but I memorized the schedule within days. Channel 3 was all infomercials, all the time. I learned about knives that could cut through shoes, blenders that could supposedly blend iPads, though why you'd want to blend an iPad was never explained, and something called the pocket hose that looked like it would break the second you looked at it wrong. Channel 7 was local news on repeat, the same stories cycling every 4 hours like some kind of Groundhog Day situation. And Channel 11 was the jackpot. Classic TV shows and movies from the 80s and 90s. I watched Pawn Stars like it was my job. I knew every episode. I could predict what the expert would say. I knew which items would sell and which ones would walk out the door with disappointed owners who thought their grandmother's antique spoon collection was worth thousands, but was actually worth maybe $50 on a good day. There was something comforting about it. Watching other people learn that their treasures were actually trash felt relatable. My only real companion during those first weeks was a fly. Not just any fly. This was a persistent little bastard that refused to die despite my best efforts. I tried swatting it with a rolled-up newspaper. Missed every time. The fly had reflexes like a fighter pilot. I tried leaving the window open, hoping it would fly out to freedom, but it apparently liked the Silver Rest Inn. Maybe it had low standards. Maybe it was as stuck as I was. Eventually, I named him Carl, because he deserved a name. Carl the Fly. He'd buzz around the room, land on the TV screen right in the middle of whatever I was watching, and just sit there like he was watching too. Sometimes I'd talk to him. Yes, I'm aware how pathetic that sounds. Yes, I was fully conscious of the fact that I'd hit a new low when my primary social interaction was with an insect. But Carl didn't judge me. Carl didn't give me mugs that insulted my existence. Carl was just there, living his best fly life, and honestly, that made him more loyal than anyone I'd left behind. But here's the thing about rock bottom, and I say this as someone who is actively getting to know the geological composition of rock bottom very intimately. You can only stay there for so long before you either dig deeper or start climbing back up. And I'm not a digger by nature. I'm a fixer. That's what I do. I fix things. Broken cabinets, leaky faucets, relationships that were doomed from the start. Okay, maybe I wasn't so great at that last one, but the principle stood. About 3 weeks into my stay at the Silver Rest Inn, I woke up one morning and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Really looked at myself. And what I saw was a guy who'd let himself go in the very specific way that men do when they stop caring. My hair was getting long in that "I've given up on society" way, not this stylish man bun way. My beard had gone from rugged to might be hiding a family of birds in there. I was wearing the same shirt I'd worn for 3 days because laundry required effort in quarters, and I was short on both. "This is pathetic, Jack," I said to my reflection. Carl buzzed past, like even he agreed. So I did something radical. I took a shower, scalding, naturally, and I actually used soap. Everywhere. I even used the complimentary shampoo that came in those tiny bottles that never have enough product to actually wash anything, but make you feel like you're getting your money's worth. Then I dug through my bag, found my least wrinkled shirt, and got dressed like I was going somewhere that mattered. I walked to the barber shop 2 blocks away, a real old-school place called Tony's, with one of those spinning red and white poles outside and pictures of hairstyles from 1965 in the window. Tony himself was probably 70, had forearms like Popeye, and didn't ask me a single question about why I looked like I'd been living in the woods. He just sat me down, asked how I wanted it cut, and got to work. 20 minutes later, I looked human again. Not great, but human. That's all I needed. Next stop, Willow Creek Hardware, a family-owned place I'd driven past about 100 times on my way to and from the motel. I walked in, found the manager. A woman named Susan who had kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, and asked if they were hiring. She looked me up and down. "You know tools." "I know tools like some people know their family members." "Better, actually." She cracked a smile. "When can you start?" "Right now if you want." And just like that, I had a job, minimum wage plus commission, but it was something. It was purpose. It was a reason to get out of that motel room and interact with humans instead of Carl. The customers at Willow Creek Hardware were exactly what you'd expect from a small-town hardware store. Old men who wanted to tell you their entire life story while shopping for a single bolt. Contractors who knew exactly what they needed and moved like efficiency machines. And confused homeowners who'd started projects way above their skill level and were now desperately trying to fix their mistakes before their spouses found out. I liked them, all of them, because they treated me like a person. They asked my advice. They laughed at my jokes, actual laughs, not the kind of laughter that feels like someone's twisting a knife. And the cashier, Melissa, flirted with me in that harmless way that people do when they're just being friendly. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was someone. Not a husband, not a stepdad, not a punchline, just Jack. Jack who knew the difference between a Phillips and a flathead. Jack who could recommend the right drill bit for any job. Jack who existed independently of anyone else's narrative about who he was supposed to be. And that feeling? That tiny spark of being seen and valued for something other than my wallet or my ability to tolerate abuse. That was worth more than all the Father's Day mugs in the world. There's this thing that happens when you start over. And I mean really start over, not just talking about starting over while you're 3 beers deep and feeling philosophical on a Tuesday night. You start noticing things, small things you took for granted or didn't even realize existed when you were busy being someone's emotional punching bag disguised as a family man. Like mornings, for instance. Mornings at the Silver Rest Inn were objectively terrible. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor's alarm go off at 5:30 every single day, followed by what sounded like him doing full-body slams into furniture, but they were mine. Nobody was asking me to make breakfast for people who'd probably spend it making jokes at my expense. Nobody was reminding me about the 17 things that needed fixing around the house. Nobody was giving me that look, you know the one. The look that says, you're here, but we don't really see you. I'd wake up, throw on whatever cleanish clothes I had left, and walk the 6 blocks to Nora's Diner. It became my routine, my ritual, my one consistent thing in a life that had gone from structured and predictable to completely off the rails. Nora's Diner was one of those places that time forgot, but in a good way. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the cracks, black and white checkered floor that had probably been installed during the Eisenhower administration, and a counter with those spinning stools that squeaked every time someone rotated. The whole place smelled like bacon grease and coffee that had been sitting on the burner just a little too long, and it was perfect. The coffee at Nora's tasted like regret. If regret was something you could brew at exactly 195 degrees and serve in chipped mugs that didn't have insulting messages on them, it was strong enough to strip paint and probably violated several health codes. But it was consistent. Every morning, same taste, same temperature, same mild sense of, is this what's going to finally do me in? But the real reason I kept going back was Dottie, the waitress who worked the morning shift. She was probably in her mid-50s, had hair dyed an aggressive shade of red that nature never intended, and called everyone sweetheart, in this way that somehow wasn't condescending. It was genuine. She'd refill your coffee without asking. Remember how you took it after the first visit? And she had this gift for knowing when someone wanted to chat and when they just wanted to be left alone with their eggs and existential crisis. Morning, sweetheart, she'd say, coffee pot already in hand before I even sat down. The usual? The usual was 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, no butter, because I was pretending to make healthy choices, and hash browns that were crispy enough to use as a weapon if necessary. It cost $6.95, which in today's economy felt like I was getting away with robbery. You got it, Dottie. She'd pour the coffee, give me this knowing look that said she understood more than I was telling her, and move on to the next customer. No prying questions. No, so what's your story? Interrogation. Just acceptance. It was refreshing in a way I didn't know I needed. Working at Willow Creek Hardware turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. Not because it was glamorous, it definitely wasn't. Or because it paid well, it definitely didn't. But because it gave me something I'd been missing for years, competence. The feeling that I was good at something and people recognized it. That's where I met Tommy. Tommy was a regular who came in at least 3 times a week, always needed something random. A specific size of washer, would stain in an exact shade, sandpaper in varying grits, and always had a story. He was a retired Marine, about 65, built like he could still do 100 push-ups without breaking a sweat, and had this way of talking that was equal parts wisdom and absolute zero tolerance for nonsense. "You knew?" he asked the first time I helped him, sizing me up like he was determining whether I was worth his time. "Started last week. You know anything? Or are you one of those kids who just points at the computer? Try me." He rattled off a list of items that would have sent most people running to find someone else, but I grabbed a card and started pulling exactly what he needed without having to look up a single thing. Toggle bolts, 3/4 inch, zinc-plated. Wood screws, number 8, 2-inch. A specific brand of wood glue that most people didn't even know existed. Tommy watched me work, nodded approvingly, and when I finished, he said, "You actually know what you're doing. That's rare. I've fixed enough stuff in my life to know my way around a hardware store." Fix stuff, or fix stuff that other people broke while pretending they knew what they were doing. I laughed, actually laughed, not the fake kind I perfected over years of being the good sport. Definitely more of the second one. That was the beginning of what I guess you'd call a friendship, though Tommy would probably call it two guys who talk, while one of them shops for hardware. He started timing his visits for when I was working. We'd talk about projects, tools, the idiots who came in asking for that thingy that holds the other thingy, and eventually life. It was Tommy who first said the thing that I'd been thinking but couldn't articulate. We were in aisle 7, fasteners and anchors. And he was telling me about his daughter's wedding, how he'd paid for the whole thing, walked her down the aisle, gave a speech that made everyone cry, the works. "Best day of my life," he said, "getting to be her dad." I must have made a face, because he stopped mid-reach for a box of drywall anchors and looked at me. "What's that look?" "Nothing. Just, that sounds nice." But nothing. It's nice. Family stuff is nice." Tommy wasn't having it. He crossed his arms, still holding the anchors, and gave me that look that Marines probably give recruits when they're about to say something that's going to hurt, but needs to be heard anyway. "Son, I've been coming to this hardware store for 15 years. I've seen a lot of employees come and go. Most of them are kids working summer jobs, don't know a Phillips from a flathead, barely look up from their phones. But you're different. You know what you're doing, you're good with people, and you look like someone kicked your dog, ran over your cat, and then came back to apologize, but the apology somehow made it worse." I opened my mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. "I'm not asking for your life story, but I'm going to tell you something that took me way too long to learn. People who laugh at you aren't people who love you. They're just people who need an audience." I stood there in aisle 7, surrounded by fasteners and anchors, which felt deeply symbolic in a way I wasn't ready to unpack. And something in my chest cracked open. Not in a bad way. More like when you've had a knot in your back for years and someone finally hits the exact right spot and it releases. "They gave me a mug for Father's Day," I said, and I don't know why I said it. It just came out. It said, "World's biggest disappointment." Tommy didn't laugh, didn't look shocked, just nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "And you stuck around after that?" "For a few hours. Then I left." "Good. That's good." He grabbed his drywall anchors and started heading toward the checkout. Then he paused, turned back. "You know what the thing about disappointment is, Jack?" "What?" "It's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of their expectations. And if their expectations were that you'd just take it, keep smiling, keep being their punching bag, then disappointing them is exactly what you should do. Son, if they laughed at you, just remember, clowns only entertain because they're miserable too. Don't be their entertainment anymore." He paid for his stuff and left, and I stood there having what I can only describe as a spiritual awakening in the middle of a hardware store. The thing about rebuilding yourself is that you can't do it alone. I mean, you can try. Lots of people try, but it works better when you've got people in your corner who see you as something other than a project or a problem. Tommy became that person. So did Susan, my manager, who let me take extra shifts when I needed the money and didn't ask why. So did Melissa at the register, who snuck me free coffee from the break room and always had a joke ready when the day was dragging. Even Dottie at Nora's Diner, who probably didn't even know my last name, became part of this weird little support system I didn't know I was building. She'd see me come in looking rough some mornings and would slide an extra piece of bacon onto my plate without charging me. Small gesture, huge impact. I started waking up earlier. Started caring about things again. Started remembering that I used to be a person who had interests and hobbies before I became someone whose entire identity was wrapped up in being married to Lydia and trying desperately to be accepted by her kids. One morning at Nora's, I was sitting in my usual booth, working through my usual breakfast, when I saw something that made me stop mid-chew. At another booth across the diner, there was a dad with his kid, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. The kid handed him a card, one of those construction paper things that kids make at school with way too much glitter and drawings that look like abstract art. The dad opened it, read whatever was scrawled inside, and his whole face lit up. Then the kid launched himself across the table for a hug, nearly knocking over their orange juice in the process, and the dad caught him laughing. I watched them, and I don't even know what I felt. It wasn't jealousy exactly. Maybe longing? Grief for something I'd never really had. I played that role, showed up to recitals, helped with homework, went to parent-teacher conferences, but I'd never gotten that hug. That genuine, unprompted, you're my person hug. I didn't cry. Wasn't going to cry in the middle of Nora's diner over my eggs and existential crisis. But I did add 3 extra sugars to my coffee that morning, just so I'd taste something sweet. Just so something would feel good, even if it was artificial and probably terrible for me. Progress isn't linear, and healing doesn't happen all at once. But somewhere between the hardware store, Tommy's wisdom, Dottie's extra bacon, and those mornings where I got to just exist without being someone's punchline, I started feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could be okay. Not happy. Not yet. But okay was a start. And okay, I was learning, was more than I'd had in a long time. You know that saying about curiosity killing the cat? Well, nobody mentions that curiosity also makes you do incredibly stupid things at 2 in the morning while you're lying in a motel bed that smells like broken dreams and industrial cleaner. Unable to sleep because your neighbor has apparently decided that 2 a.m. is the perfect time to rearrange every piece of furniture they own. Repeatedly. With enthusiasm. I'd been doing pretty well, all things considered. I had my routine. I had my job. I had Tommy dropping wisdom bombs in the fasteners aisle and Dottie slipping me extra bacon like she was running some kind of breakfast-based support group. I'd kept my phone off for the most part, only turning it on to check my bank account and make sure I hadn't accidentally overdraft buying Carl the Fly a proper funeral after he finally met his end courtesy of the window I'd left open. R.I.P. Carl. You were a real one. But that night, that stupid, sleepless night, I made the mistake of turning on my phone and opening Facebook. Not my real account, mind you. I wasn't that dumb. No, I created what the kids call a burner account. Fake name, fake profile picture. I used some stock photo of a golden retriever because who's going to suspect a golden retriever of digital espionage? And 0 friends. Just me, my fake dog identity, and my terrible decision-making skills. I typed Lydia's name into the search bar like I was defusing a bomb, half hoping she'd made her profile private, half knowing she absolutely hadn't, because Lydia's relationship with social media was like a performance art piece titled, "Look How Perfect My Life Is." Her profile popped up immediately. Of course it did. Public. Wide open. Might as well have had a neon sign that said, "Come watch me curate my existence." The cover photo was new. Her and the kids at some beach. Everyone in white linen like they were auditioning for a tourism commercial. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked perfect. Everyone looked like they definitely hadn't emotionally destroyed someone and driven him to live in a motel where the ice machine sounded like it was dying. I scrolled through her recent posts, and it was exactly what you'd expect. Inspirational quotes about strength and resilience overlaid on pictures of sunsets. Selfies with captions like, "Just vibing sparkles," and "Coffee and confidence hot beverage flexed biceps," that had racked up hundreds of likes from people who probably didn't know her well enough to realize that her confidence was built on a foundation of making other people feel small. There were brunch photos, because of course there were brunch photos. Is it even a midlife crisis if you're not documenting your avocado toast? With hashtags like hashtag #StrongMomStickTogether and hashtag healing and hashtag living my best life. The comments were full of her friends hyping her up. "You go, girl. Looking amazing. Proud of you for staying strong." Strong. That word kept coming up. Like she was the survivor here. Like she was the one who'd been through something traumatic and was bravely soldiering on. Not the woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation and then acted surprised when I had the audacity to remove myself from the situation. I kept scrolling, falling deeper into this rabbit hole of manufactured happiness. And that's when I noticed something weird. Actually, not weird, alarming. Suspicious. The kind of thing that makes you sit up in bed and squint at your phone like maybe you're seeing it wrong. There were no pictures of Madison. None. Lydia's Instagram. Because of course I checked that too. I was already in full stalker mode. Used to be basically a Madison fan page. Madison at soccer practice. Madison at debate club. Madison with her friends. Madison's honor roll certificate. Madison breathing. Every major life event, every minor achievement, every single moment of that girl's existence had been documented and hashtagged and posted for the world to see. But now, nothing. Not for the past month and a half. The last post featuring Madison was from early June, right before Father's Day, actually, and it was some generic "so proud of my girl" caption with a picture from her junior year award ceremony. After that, radio silence. Just Lydia. Lydia at brunch. Lydia with her wine night girls. Lydia looking pensively out windows like she was in a music video about overcoming adversity. But no Madison. Eli showed up occasionally in the background of photos, usually on his phone, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Which, honestly, relatable. But Madison? It was like she'd been scrubbed from the record. Like Lydia had gone through and edited her out of the narrative. Now, I'm not a detective. My investigative skills peaked at finding the TV remote when it's wedged between couch cushions. But even I knew this meant something. This meant something was off. Because Lydia didn't just stop posting about her golden child for no reason. Madison was her pride and joy, her greatest accomplishment, the living proof that she was an amazing mother who'd raised an exceptional human being. So where was she? I spent the next 2 hours, yes, 2 full hours, I'm not proud of it, going through Lydia's friends list, clicking on profiles, looking for any mention of Madison. Most of them had private profiles, which was incredibly frustrating. But a few were public, and I found fragments. Clues. Digital breadcrumbs. Lydia's sister Diane had posted something cryptic 3 weeks ago. Sometimes the hardest part of parenting is letting them learn lessons the hard way. Praying for peace in our family folded hands, with a bunch of comments from people asking if everything was okay, which Diane never answered. Her friend Sandra from Pilates. The same Sandra who'd commented praying for you, hun, on the missing husband post, had shared an article about when your teen makes choices you don't agree with no caption. But Lydia had commented red heart, and so needed this today. And then there was the smoking gun, buried in a comment thread on one of Lydia's brunch photos from 2 weeks ago. Someone named Jennifer, didn't recognize her, probably a work friend, had written, "Glad you're taking time for yourself. You deserve it after everything with them. Call me if you need to talk." Everything with them. M as in Madison. Everything with Madison. What the hell did that mean? What had happened? Had she run away? Gotten into trouble? Joined a cult? Started a punk band? The possibilities were endless, and my caffeine and curiosity-fueled brain was running through all of them at warp speed. I sat there in that motel room, the glow of my phone screen the only light, and I felt this weird mix of emotions. Concern, definitely, because whatever had happened, Madison was still technically my stepdaughter, and despite the whole world's biggest disappointment mug incident, I didn't wish bad things on her. Curiosity, obviously, because I'm human and humans are nosy creatures who can't resist a mystery. But also, and I'm not proud of this, a little bit of satisfaction. Not satisfaction that something bad might have happened to Madison. I'm not a monster. But satisfaction that maybe, just maybe, Lydia's perfect little world wasn't quite as perfect as she was presenting it online. That maybe the woman who'd spent years making me feel inadequate was dealing with her own inadequacies. That maybe karma was real and it had an Instagram account. I know. That makes me sound petty and vindictive. And maybe I was being petty and vindictive. But you try being emotionally demolished by your family and then watching them play happy on social media while pretending you never existed. See how zen and enlightened you feel about it. I clicked on Madison's profile next, because I'd already given up on having any dignity. Her last post was from 2 months ago, a selfie with some caption about summer plans and freedom. The comments were typical teenager stuff, friends hyping her up, some emojis, nothing that screamed, family crisis imminent. But she hadn't posted since. And for an 18-year-old who used to post at least once a day, that was weird. That was very weird. I thought about messaging her. Actually typed out a message. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. But I deleted it before sending because what was I going to say? Hi, I'm your mom's ex-husband who left without saying goodbye and is now internet stalking you from a fake dog account at 2 in the morning. Just wanted to see if you're alive? Yeah, that would go over great. Instead, I bookmarked Lydia's profile and told myself I'd check it periodically. Not every day. That would be obsessive. Just occasionally. You know, to make sure everyone was alive and not doing anything that required calling the authorities. Totally normal, totally healthy behavior. The sun was starting to come up by the time I finally put my phone down. My neighbor had stopped moving furniture around, probably exhausted from whatever the hell they'd been doing for the past 4 hours. Carl's successor, I'd named him Carl Jr., was buzzing around the lamp, and I could hear the highway starting to pick up with morning traffic. I had work in 3 hours. I needed to sleep. But my brain was doing that thing where it grabs onto a mystery and won't let go, like a dog with a bone, running through every possible scenario. Maybe Madison had gotten in trouble at school. Maybe she'd gotten pregnant. Though God, I hoped not. That would be a nightmare. Maybe she'd just decided she was tired of being Lydia's performing monkey and had asked for some privacy. Maybe she'd gone to stay with her biological father, though Lydia never talked about him, which usually meant the situation there was complicated. Or maybe, and this was the thought that kept circling back, maybe Madison had realized what I'd realized, that living in that house, being part of that family dynamic, was slowly killing whatever authentic self you had. Maybe she'd left too. The irony wouldn't be lost on Lydia if that was the case. Spend years curating this image of the perfect blended family. Give your husband a mug that says he's a disappointment. Watch him leave. Then have your daughter follow suit. It would be like a Greek tragedy if Greek tragedies were set in suburban America and involved social media. I finally fell asleep around 6:30, still holding my phone, still wondering. And when I woke up 2 hours later for work, groggy and unrest, the first thing I did was check Lydia's Facebook again. New post. Picture of her morning coffee with the caption, "New day, new blessings. Grateful for growth and change, seedling son." 43 likes already. 0 mentions of where her daughter was. And just like that, I realized something. Lydia's life on social media was a fairy tale. Carefully edited, strategically posted, designed to make everyone believe in the happily ever after. But I'd lived in that story. I knew what happened behind the scenes when the camera was off. And fairy tales, I was learning, were just pretty lies we told ourselves to avoid dealing with the truth. Guilt is a funny thing. Not, haha, funny. More like, wake up in a cold sweat at 3 in the morning wondering if you're actually a terrible person funny. The kind of funny that isn't funny at all and makes you question every decision you've ever made while staring at a water stain on the ceiling that looks disturbingly like a judge's gavel. I'd been gone for almost 2 months. 2 months of living at the Silver Rest Inn, which I'd somehow managed to make feel almost livable. I'd bought an air freshener that made the place smell like mountain fresh instead of despair and mildew. And I'd finally won the war against the roaches by leaving out strategic traps like I was some kind of extermination general. 2 months of working at Willow Creek Hardware, building up a modest savings account that was mine and mine alone. 2 months of actually feeling like a person instead of a punchline. But in all that time, through all those small victories and moments of, hey, maybe I'm not completely broken, there was this one thing nagging at me like a splinter you can't quite reach. One person I'd left behind who didn't deserve it. Eli, my stepson, the quiet one. The kid who'd filmed my Father's Day humiliation but had at least looked uncomfortable about it. The one who never really joined in on the jokes, never piled on when Lydia and Madison were on a roll. He just existed in the background, like a stagehand in a play he never auditioned for. I'd been so focused on getting away from Lydia and Madison, so wrapped up in my own pain and the need to escape, that I'd never stopped to think about how it would affect him. And that's the thing about being the bigger person, or trying to be, anyway. You eventually have to face the fact that your pain doesn't exist in a vacuum. It splashes. It spreads. It hits people who were just standing nearby. Eli wasn't the one who'd hurt me. Sure, he'd been there. He'd held the camera, but I knew him well enough to know he'd probably been told it was just a harmless prank. That I'd think it was funny. That it was all in good fun. And when you're 16 and your mom is telling you something, you tend to believe her, even when your gut is saying something else entirely. So one night, After a particularly long shift at the hardware store where I'd helped this elderly woman find the exact right screws to fix her late husband's birdhouse, and she'd gotten teary-eyed and thanked me like I'd saved her life, I went back to my motel room and did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. An actual, physical, pen and paper letter. Not a text. Not an email. Not a Facebook message from my fake golden retriever account. A real letter, because some things deserve the weight of ink on paper, the permanence of words you can hold in your hands. I sat at the tiny desk in my room, right next to the window where Carl Jr. liked to hang out, with a pad of paper I'd bought from the dollar store and a pen I'd stolen from the hardware store. Sorry, Susan. And I started writing. The first draft was terrible. Too angry. Too much about me and not enough about him. I crumpled it up and threw it at the trash can, missed by about 3 feet, and started again. The second draft was too casual, like I was writing to a buddy instead of a kid I'd helped raise for 3 years. Crumpled. Tossed. Missed again. My hand-eye coordination really suffered during my time in that motel. The third draft felt right. Or at least, as right as this kind of thing could feel. Hey, bud. It started, because that's what I'd always called him. Not son. That felt presumptuous, like I was trying to replace someone I'd never even met. Just bud. Simple. Honest. I'm okay. I know you're probably wondering where I went. Or maybe you're not. I don't really know what your mom told you about all this. But I wanted you to hear it from me. So here it is. I didn't leave because of you. I need you to know that. Whatever happened, whatever you've heard, this wasn't about you. Sometimes adults need to step away to find their peace. That sounds like something you'd read on a motivational poster with a picture of a sunset, and I know it's kind of vague and probably frustrating to hear. But the truth is complicated, and you're smart enough to know that life isn't as simple as good guys and bad guys. I'm not going to badmouth your mom. That's not what this is about. But I also can't pretend that everything was okay when it wasn't. I stayed as long as I could, tried as hard as I could, and eventually I had to choose between being there and being okay. I chose being okay. I hope someday you understand that. You're a good kid, Eli. Quiet, but good. You've got this way of seeing things that most people miss because they're too busy talking. Don't lose that. The world needs more people who pay attention. If you ever want to talk about anything, about nothing, about this whole mess, or just about life in general, I'm around. I'm staying in Willow Creek, working at the hardware store on Main Street. But more than that, I'll be at the Willow Creek Library on Saturday at 3 p.m. Just sitting there, probably reading something boring about home improvement or how to fix things that are actually unfixable. If you show up, great. If you don't, I understand. No pressure. No expectations. Just an open door if you want to walk through it. Take care of yourself, bud. And remember, you're not responsible for other people's happiness. Not mine, not your mom's, not your sister's. Just your own. Jack. I read it over about 15 times, changing a word here and there, second-guessing every sentence. Was it too much? Not enough? Would he even get it? Or would Lydia intercept it and throw it away? Would he think I was pathetic for reaching out? Would he crumple it up and toss it without reading, the same way I'd toss my failed drafts? But eventually, I had to just commit. I folded the letter, put it in an envelope I'd also bought from the dollar store, white, plain, nothing fancy, and wrote his name on the front. Just Eli. Not his last name, not the full address on the front, because I was going to hand-deliver this thing. Well, not hand-deliver directly. I wasn't ready for a face-to-face confrontation with Lydia at the front door, but I knew Eli's schedule. Kid was a creature of habit, just like me. Every Thursday, he stayed after school for computer club until 5, then walked home because he said he liked the exercise, but really I think he just liked having an excuse to put on headphones and avoid human interaction for 20 minutes. So that Thursday, I drove to his school, felt incredibly creepy doing it, like I was some kind of stalker, but I pushed through, and I waited in the parking lot until I saw him come out. He was by himself, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe. I got out of my truck, heart pounding like I was about to rob a bank instead of just giving a kid a letter. Eli. He looked up, and I watched his face cycle through about 17 emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise. Confusion. Relief? Maybe. Or maybe I was projecting. Then something that looked like wariness, like he wasn't sure if he should be happy to see me or worried. Jack. He pulled out his headphones, glanced around like he was checking if anyone was watching. What are you doing here? I wanted to give you this. I held out the envelope, suddenly very aware of how ridiculous this whole thing was. A grown man, lurking in a high school parking lot, handing out letters like it was 1952 and we didn't have phones. I know it's weird. This whole thing is weird. But I didn't have your number, and I didn't want to contact you through your mom. So, yeah, letter. He took it slowly, like he thought it might explode. Is everything okay? Are you okay? I'm fine. Better, actually. I stopped. Because how do you explain to a 16-year-old that you're not mad at him, but you couldn't stay in a house that was slowly destroying you? Read the letter. It explains everything. Or tries to, anyway. He held the envelope, turning it over in his hands. Mom said you just left. That you didn't say anything to anyone. That's true. I did. And I'm sorry for that. You deserved better. Madison said. He stopped, bit his lip, looked away. What did Madison say? Nothing. Never mind. But his jaw was tight, and I could see he was holding something back. Eli, whatever she said, whatever anyone said, you can talk to me. I know I left, and I know that probably looks bad, but I'm still here. If you need me. He nodded, but didn't say anything else. Just stood there, clutching the letter, and I realized I'd done what I came to do. The ball was in his court now. He could read it or throw it away. He could show up on Saturday or not. I couldn't control that. I could only control my part. Saturday, I said. 3 p.m. Library. If you want. Okay. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was an okay, which in teenager language could mean absolutely anything. I got back in my truck and drove away, watching him in the rearview mirror as he stood there in that parking lot, staring at the envelope like it was a puzzle he hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Saturday came. I showed up at the Willow Creek Library at 2:30 because I'm the kind of person who shows up early to everything, even potentially life-changing meetings with my estranged stepson. The library was one of those small-town libraries that felt like someone's grandmother's house. Lots of wood paneling, the smell of old books mixed with coffee from the little cafe in the corner, big windows that let in too much light for proper dramatic brooding. I found a table near the back, away from the kids section where some poor librarian was trying to manage story time while toddlers ran around like they'd been fed pure sugar, and I sat down with a book I'd grabbed randomly from the shelf. Something about woodworking. Didn't matter. I wasn't reading it anyway. I was watching the door. 3 o'clock came. Then 3:05. 3:10. By 3:15, I'd accepted that he wasn't coming, and I was trying to figure out if I felt relieved or devastated. Maybe both. Maybe that was okay. Then, at 3:17, the door opened, and there he was, taller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just forgotten. Nervous, clutching his backpack like it was a shield, looking around the library like he was checking for snipers. Our eyes met, and then he said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Dad?" Not Jack. Not hey, Dad. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that word until it hit me square in the chest like a fastball I wasn't ready for. Hey, bud. I stood up, wasn't sure if I should hug him or shake his hand or just stand there like an idiot. You came. Yeah. He walked over, still cautious, still not quite sure what this was. I read your letter. Like 15 times. And I think we should talk. So we sat, and we talked. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I hadn't destroyed everything after all. There's this moment when you're rebuilding your life, somewhere between living in a motel with roaches and actually having your crap together, where things start clicking into place so naturally that you almost don't notice it's happening. It's not dramatic. There's no montage with inspirational music. It's just Tuesday, and then suddenly Tuesday doesn't feel like you're drowning anymore. That's where I was at 3 months after leaving. 3 months of small victories that added up to something that felt suspiciously like progress. The meeting with Eli had cracked something open in me. Not in a now everything's fixed way, because life isn't a Hallmark movie and one conversation doesn't solve years of dysfunction. But it reminded me that I wasn't just some walking disaster who'd failed at being part of a family. I was a person who'd mattered to someone. Still mattered. That counted for something. We started meeting every other Saturday at the library. Sometimes we'd talk about serious stuff, how he was doing, what life was like at home with Lydia and Madison, though he was always careful not to say too much, still trying to be loyal to his mom while also being honest with me. Other times we'd just talk about normal stuff. School. The video games he was playing. This girl he liked, but was too nervous to talk to. I gave him terrible advice about that, by the way. My track record with relationships wasn't exactly stellar. But those meetings? They were my anchor. Proof that I hadn't completely screwed everything up. Proof that leaving didn't mean I had to lose everyone. Work at Willow Creek Hardware was going better than I'd expected to. I'd gotten a small raise. Only 50 cents more an hour, but when you're living on a tight budget, 50 cents feels like winning the lottery. Susan, my manager, had started giving me more responsibility. Ordering inventory, training new employees, basically running the place when she wasn't there. "You're good at this," she told me one afternoon while we were doing inventory in the back room, counting boxes of nails like we were archaeologists cataloging ancient artifacts. "Better than good, actually. You ever think about managing your own place?" "Not really. I'm just trying to keep my head above water right now." "Well, when you're ready to do more than tread water, let me know. You've got a knack for this. And people like you. That's rare. People liked me. What a concept. At the house, I'd stopped calling it home in my head. I'd been tolerated at best. But here, people actually sought me out, asked for my advice, remembered my name. It was wild. And then there was Tommy, still coming in 3 times a week, still dropping wisdom like he was getting paid for it. We'd graduated from just talking in the aisles to occasionally grabbing coffee after my shift at this place down the street that served coffee that didn't taste like it had been filtered through a gym sock. "You seem different," he said one day, stirring sugar into his coffee with the intensity of someone performing surgery. "Less like a kicked puppy, more like a guy who's got his feet under him." "I bought a pickup truck," I said, like that explained everything. And in a way, it did. I'd saved up enough to buy a used Ford F-150 from a guy on Craigslist. It was 12 years old, had a dent in the passenger side door, and the radio only worked intermittently, but it was mine. Fully paid for. No car payments. No strings attached. Just me and my slightly beat-up truck. A truck. That's good. That's real good. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. Haul stuff, I guess. Whatever people with trucks do. Tommy laughed. "You should put that entrepreneurial spirit to work. You know how to fix things. You've got a truck. You know what that makes you. Employed. A handyman. Start your own business. Advertise on Facebook or whatever you kids do these days. Jack's Repairs or something. People always need stuff fixed, and most of the people doing it are either too expensive or complete idiots." I laughed it off at first, but the idea stuck with me like gum on a shoe. A handyman business. My own thing. No boss except myself. No wife telling me I was doing it wrong. Just me, my skills, and people who actually wanted my help. So I did something crazy. Well, crazy for me. I started a YouTube channel. I know. YouTube? Really? Every middle-aged guy going through a crisis thinks he's going to become a YouTuber and get rich making videos about whatever boring hobby he's into. I wasn't delusional enough to think I'd become famous or make millions. But I figured if nothing else, it would be a portfolio. Proof that I knew what I was talking about. I called it Handy Truths because I'm apparently terrible at naming things, but also because I wanted it to be honest. No BS. No pretending that every project goes perfectly. Just real talk about tools, repairs, and the disasters that happen when you think you know what you're doing, but actually don't. My first video was filmed on my phone, propped up on a stack of books in my motel room, and it was about the different types of screwdrivers and when to use them. Riveting content, I know. I expected maybe 12 views, mostly from bots and my own mother if she still remembered I existed. But I made it funny. Or tried to, anyway. I used the same sarcastic humor that had kept me sane through years of being the family joke, except this time I was in on it. I was the one making the jokes. "This is a Phillips head screwdriver," I said, holding it up to the camera. "Named after Henry Phillips, who invented it in the 1930s and probably never imagined that 90 years later, a guy living in a motel would be explaining it to strangers on the internet. If you want a drill that'll die faster than your enthusiasm for marriage, don't buy this one." I posted it at midnight on a Tuesday because I was too nervous to post it during normal hours when people might actually see it. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, already regretting everything. The next morning, I checked. 53 views. 12 likes. 3 comments. "This is actually helpful. Thanks." Subscribed. More please. Finally someone who doesn't talk like a robot. "Keep it up, dude." I made another video. Then another. Reviews of tools I'd used at work. Tutorials on basic home repairs. A particularly unhinged rant about why people needed to stop using duct tape for everything, because duct tape is not a universal solution, Karen, despite what your Pinterest board says. That one went viral. Well, viral by my standards. 20,000 views in a week. Comments pouring in from people who either thought I was hilarious or were deeply offended that I'd insulted their duct tape usage. Either way, they were watching. Companies started emailing me. Small ones at first, brands I'd never heard of asking if I'd review their products. They'd send me free stuff, and I'd make a video about whether it was worth buying. I was honest, sometimes brutally so, and people seemed to appreciate that. In a world full of influencers who'd say anything was amazing if someone paid them enough, I was the guy who'd tell you if something sucked. This drill costs $49 and claims it can handle any job around the house. That's a lie. I used it to hang 3 pictures, and it started smoking. Not metaphorically smoking, like it was cool and impressive. Actually smoking, like it was about to catch fire and burn down my motel room. 0 stars. Don't buy this. The views kept climbing. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became tens of thousands. My subscriber count hit 5,000, then 10,000. Companies I'd actually heard of started reaching out. Sponsorship offers. Not enough to quit my day job, but enough to move out of the Silver Rest Inn and into an actual apartment. Not a nice apartment. Let's not get crazy here. But a 1-bedroom place above a pizza shop in downtown Willow Creek that smelled like pepperoni and possibilities. It had a real kitchen, a bathroom where the tiles were actually white, a bedroom that didn't come with complimentary roaches. I signed the lease and felt like I'd just bought a mansion. Tommy helped me move, which was easy because I barely had anything. My 2 shirts had become 6 shirts. I bought a real bed frame instead of just a mattress on the floor. Got a desk for editing videos. A bookshelf that was mostly empty but made me feel like an adult who had their life together. Look at you, Tommy said, surveying my new place with approval. From motel to apartment. From walking disaster to minor internet celebrity. What's next? Writing a book about your journey. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm serious, Jack. You've done something here. You took a garbage situation and turned it into something. Most people just stay in the garbage and complain. You climbed out. I wanted to argue with him, to say it wasn't that impressive, that I was still figuring things out, and probably 1 bad month away from being back in a motel. But standing there in my new apartment. Small and smelling like pizza, but mine, I couldn't. Because he was right. I had done something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually living. The YouTube channel kept growing. I posted twice a week, every week, and people kept watching. The money started trickling in, ad revenue, sponsorships, affiliate links. It wasn't quit your day job money yet, but it was pay your rent and eat something besides ramen money. It was freedom money. For the first time since I'd walked out of that house with a duffel bag and my dignity in tatters, I felt like I wasn't running away from something. I was running towards something, building something, becoming someone who wasn't defined by being Lydia's husband or Madison's stepdad or the guy from the disappointing mug. I was just Jack Harris, guy who knew too much about hardware, guy who made videos that people actually wanted to watch, guy who'd been knocked down but got back up and dusted himself off and said, "Okay, what's next?" And the voice that had been mocked for being boring, the one Lydia and Madison had laughed at, that voice was now paying my bills. Funny how that worked out. One night, I was editing a video in my new apartment when my phone buzzed. A message from Eli. "Saw your latest video. Mom saw it too. She's pissed." I smiled. Then I kept editing. Because the best revenge isn't getting even. It's not stooping to their level or playing their games. The best revenge is thriving so loud they can't stand the noise. And I was just getting started. You know what nobody tells you about success? Even small, modest, I can finally afford name brand cereal success? It makes you paranoid. Not in a tinfoil hat the government is watching kind of way, but in a I've built something and am terrified someone's going to take it away kind of way. And when that someone is your estranged wife who has a law degree she never uses, but definitely knows how to weaponize when it suits her purposes. Yeah, the paranoia feels pretty justified. It started with a comment Eli made during one of our Saturday library sessions. We were sitting in our usual spot. I'd basically claimed this corner table as my own at this point, and the librarians knew me by name. And he was telling me about his college application essays when he just casually dropped this bomb. "Mom's been asking about you a lot lately." I looked up from the coffee I'd brought from Nora's diner. Dottie had started giving me a to-go cup when she saw me heading toward the library, bless her heart. Asking what? Just where you're living, what you're doing, if you have a job. He shifted uncomfortably, picking at a loose thread on his backpack. She's been weird about it. Like, more interested than she should be, you know? How interested are we talking? Mildly curious interested, or consulting with lawyers interested? I don't know. Maybe somewhere in the middle? She saw one of your YouTube videos. The one about the circular saw. Oh, the circular saw video. That one had done particularly well. Almost 50,000 views. I'd reviewed 3 different models, roasted 2 of them mercilessly, and the third one I'd actually recommended. The recommended one sales had apparently spiked after my video, and the company had sent me a thank you email along with a check that made me genuinely excited about a piece of paper. And what did she say about it? Eli looked even more uncomfortable, which was saying something because the kid's baseline was mildly uncomfortable with existence. She said it's interesting that you have money for video equipment, but apparently didn't have money for the family. There it was. The narrative. I could see it forming like storm clouds on the horizon. Jack, the deadbeat who abandoned his family and is now living it up making YouTube videos while his poor wife struggles to keep things together. Never mind that the video equipment was my iPhone propped on a stack of books. Never mind that every dollar I'd made, I'd earned myself after leaving. Never mind that I'd paid every bill, every mortgage payment, every single expense for that family right up until the day I left. But facts didn't matter when someone was building a story. And Lydia? Lydia was excellent at building stories. Eli, I need you to be honest with me. Do you think your mom is going to try to come after me for money? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I don't know. Maybe. She's been talking to Aunt Diane a lot. And you know how Aunt Diane gets. Oh, I knew. Diane was Lydia's older sister, a corporate lawyer who viewed every interaction as a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. She'd never liked me. I was too blue-collar, too unambitious, too settling for mediocre, in her expert opinion. The fact that her own marriage had imploded spectacularly 3 years ago didn't seem to factor into her relationship advice at all. I drove home that day with my mind racing. I'd been so focused on building something, on moving forward, that I hadn't thought about protecting what I was building. And that was stupid. That was incredibly, monumentally stupid. So I did what any reasonable person who's mildly paranoid and has trust issues would do. I called an accountant. Not just any accountant, my buddy Rick from high school. We'd lost touch over the years, but reconnected randomly when he came into the hardware store looking for some specific type of bolt for a project and recognized me. We'd grabbed a beer, caught up, and I'd learned he now ran his own accounting firm in the next town over. Rick? It's Jack. Jack Harris. Yeah, from the hardware store. Listen, I need your professional help with something, and I'm willing to pay your full rate. So don't give me any friends and family discount BS. We met at his office the next day. Rick's office was exactly what you'd expect from an accountant. Lots of gray, some motivational posters about fiscal responsibility, and a desk so organized it made me feel like my life was chaos incarnate just by comparison. So, Rick said, leaning back in his chair with his hands folded like he was about to deliver news about a terminal illness, you want to protect your assets from your wife. Soon-to-be ex-wife. And yeah, is that bad? That feels like it should be bad, but also it feels like common sense. It's not bad, it's smart. Especially if you think she's going to come after you. Tell me what you've got. I laid it all out. The YouTube channel that was making decent money. Not buy a yacht money, but pay rent and groceries without having a panic attack money. The small but growing savings account. The truck I'd bought outright. The tools I'd accumulated. The sponsorship deals that were starting to come in. And you left how many months ago? 4.5. Have you filed for divorce? No. I probably should have, but I've been, I don't know, avoiding it, hoping it would just resolve itself somehow. Rick gave me the look that professionals give when you've said something incredibly dumb, but they're too polite to say it directly. Jack, buddy, you need to file. Like yesterday. The longer you wait, the more complicated this gets. But in the meantime, yeah, we can set up some protection. He explained it all to me. Business trusts, asset protection, separating personal and business finances. It made my head hurt, honestly. I was a guy who knew which screwdriver to use for which job. Legal and financial structures were not my forte. Here's what I recommend, Rick said, pulling up something on his computer. We set up an LLC for your YouTube business. Handy Truths LLC. You put everything related to the channel under that. We also set up a trust for any major assets. The truck, savings beyond what you need for basic living expenses, any equipment. And we make sure everything is properly documented from here on out. And that protects it if Lydia tries to claim she's entitled to half. It makes it significantly harder for her to claim she's entitled to half of something you built entirely after you separated. You're not hiding assets. That's illegal and stupid. You're just organizing them properly. If she wants to fight about it, let her. But you'll have all your ducks in a row. We spent the next 2 hours setting everything up. Paperwork, signatures, discussions about tax implications that made me want to take a nap. But by the end of it, I felt better. Not completely secure. You're never completely secure when dealing with someone who views conflict as a competitive sport, but better. One more thing, Rick said as I was getting ready to leave. The trust. You should name a beneficiary. Someone who gets it if something happens to you. I didn't even hesitate. Eli, my stepson. Not your biological son? No, but he's the only one who showed up when it mattered. That counts for something. Rick nodded and made a note. Divorce prep? Nah. Emotional bankruptcy recovery. He laughed, but it wasn't really a joke. That's exactly what it was. Recovering from the emotional bankruptcy of giving everything to people who gave nothing back. A week later, I took another step I'd been putting off. I hired a lawyer. Not a big, expensive, shark-in-a-suit lawyer. I couldn't afford that, but a lawyer nonetheless. A woman named Jill who specialized in what her website called asset protection for complex family situations, which I figured was lawyer speak for when your spouse is going to make your life hell. Jill's office was above a sandwich shop and smelled like pastrami and legal documents. She was probably in her mid-40s, had reading glasses on a chain around her neck like somebody's cool aunt, and had this direct way of talking that I appreciated immediately. So you left your wife after she gave you a mug that said you were a disappointment. You've been gone for months. You haven't filed for divorce. You've started a successful YouTube channel. And now you think she's going to come after you for money. Did I get all that right? When you say it like that, it sounds like a really weird country song. Most divorces are weird country songs. That's why I have a job. Here's my advice, and you're paying for this advice, so listen carefully. File for divorce now. Don't wait for her to file. You file first, you control the narrative. You also establish clearly that anything you've earned since leaving is separate property. But we're still legally married. Yes, but you've been separated. If you can prove you've been living separately, supporting yourself, not commingling finances, the court will generally consider assets acquired during separation to be separate property. Generally, nothing's guaranteed, but you've got a better shot if you're proactive. And what if she fights it? Jill smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested she'd seen some stuff in her career. Some really messy stuff. Then she fights it. But here's the thing about people who try to take what isn't theirs. They usually show their ass in the process. Courts don't like spite. They don't like greed disguised as fairness. If she comes after you for assets you earned after leaving, assets you built from nothing while living in a motel, most judges are going to see through that. So what do? You document everything. Every dollar you earn, where it comes from, where it goes. Every video you make, every sponsorship deal, every expense. You keep it all separate from anything joint. You don't give her ammunition. And most importantly, she leaned forward, glasses sliding down her nose. You thrive. You succeed so loudly, so obviously, so undeniably that when people look at the situation, they don't see a man who abandoned his family. They see a man who left a toxic situation and built something better. I like Jill. I liked her a lot. Sometimes the best revenge, she continued, is thriving so loud they can't stand the noise. And from what you've told me, you're already doing that. Keep doing it. Just do it with proper legal protection. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Prepared. Not scared. Not reactive. Prepared. I had an accountant, a lawyer, a plan. I had documentation and structures and all the boring adult stuff that nobody tells you matters until it suddenly matters a lot. That night, I sat in my apartment above the pizza shop, editing my latest video, a comparison of different types of wood stain that was somehow getting decent views, and I thought about how far I'd come. For months ago, I was sleeping on a sagging mattress in a roach-infested motel. wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Now, I had an apartment, a business, a plan, a lawyer who understood that sometimes leaving isn't giving up, it's survival, an accountant who made sure I wasn't going to lose everything I'd built. And most importantly, I had something they couldn't take away from me, proof that I wasn't the disappointment they'd labeled me as. I was just disappointed in them, and I was done letting that define me. The mug sat on my desk, holding pins now instead of pain. Every time I looked at it, I smiled. They'd thought they were breaking me, but all they'd really done was set me free. And now I was making damn sure nobody could cage me again. Social media is a beautiful thing when you want to keep tabs on people without actually talking to them. It's like having a window into someone's life, except they're deliberately staging everything in that window to make you think their life is perfect. And if you're petty enough, which, let's be honest, I absolutely was, you can use that window to figure out exactly when to make your grand reappearance. That's how I found out about Madison's graduation party. I was scrolling through Facebook on my fake golden retriever account. Yes, I still had it. Don't judge me. When I saw the post. Big announcement from Lydia, complete with one of those custom graphic designs that look like someone paid money on Etsy to make it look fancy. Graduation celebration. Join us in celebrating Madison's achievement. Saturday, June 15th, 2 to 6 p.m. Food, music, and memories. Open house. All are welcome. Graduation cap party popper. All are welcome. That was the phrase that got me. All are welcome. I wondered if that all included the husband she'd emotionally demolished and then reported missing on Facebook like I was a lost dog. Probably not. But technically, she'd said all were welcome, and I'm a big believer in taking people at their word. Plus, I had some things I needed to say, some closure I needed to get, and maybe, just maybe, I wanted them to see what I'd become. Not the broken guy who'd left with a duffel bag and a destroyed sense of self-worth. The guy who'd rebuilt himself into something better. So I marked it on my calendar. June 15th, Madison's graduation party. The day I'd make my return. I told Tommy about it over coffee 2 days before the party. He looked at me like I'd just announced I was planning to skydive without a parachute. You're going to do what now? I'm going to the party. Just to make an appearance. Say congratulations. Be civil. Jack. Buddy. That's a terrible idea. Probably. But I'm doing it anyway. Why? What's the point? You've moved on. You've got your life together. Why go back there? I thought about it, stirring sugar into my coffee that didn't need any more sugar. Because they need to see that they didn't break me. Because Madison's graduating and despite everything, I helped raise that kid for 3 years. Because I want them to know that I'm not hiding. I'm not ashamed. I left and I'm fine. Better than fine. Tommy sighed, the kind of sigh that said he knew he wasn't going to talk me out of this. At least don't go alone. You want backup? Nah. This is something I need to do myself. But I appreciate the offer. You're either brave or stupid, and I haven't figured out which yet. Can it be both? Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunny, not too hot, the kind of day that made you believe good things were possible. I put on my best jeans, a button-up shirt that I'd actually ironed, and boots that I'd cleaned until they looked almost new. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the guy staring back. Confident, put together. Not the defeated man who'd shuffled out 4 months ago. The house. God, I still thought of it as the house, even though I'd paid the mortgage for 3 years, looked exactly the same from the outside. Same beige siding. Same mailbox I'd installed. Same driveway where I'd taught Madison to parallel park and she'd nearly taken out the neighbor's trash cans. There was a big tent in the backyard. I could hear music playing, people laughing, the sound of a party in full swing. For a second, I almost turned around, almost got back in my truck and drove away. This was stupid. This was asking for trouble. But then I remembered the mug. I remembered Lydia's Facebook post about me being missing. I remembered every joke at my expense, every time I'd smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. I walked up the driveway like I owned the place. Because technically, legally, I still half own the place. That was a conversation for the lawyers, but for now, it gave me the confidence to walk through that gate into the backyard like I belonged there. The party stopped. Not immediately, not dramatically, but like someone had slowly turned down the volume on everything. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Someone dropped a plastic cup. The music kept playing, some pop song I didn't recognize, but suddenly it felt too loud. Lydia was standing near the drinks table, wine glass halfway to her lips, frozen like someone had hit pause on her life. Her face went through this incredible journey of emotions: surprise, confusion, anger, panic, and finally landing on something that looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Madison was by the cake table, wearing a blue dress and a graduation cap that said "Done" in glitter letters. She went pale. Actually pale, like she'd seen a ghost, which I guess in a way she had. But Eli? Eli was sitting at one of those rented tables with some friends, and when he saw me, his whole face lit up. He stood, started walking toward me, and that was all the confirmation I needed that I'd made the right choice. Jack. Lydia's voice cut through the awkward silence like a knife through butter. What are you doing here? I smiled. Calm. Easy. Like I just stopped by to borrow a cup of sugar. Just dropping by to say congratulations. It is an open house, right? All are welcome. I could see her brain working, trying to figure out how to handle this. She couldn't make a scene, not in front of all these people, not at Madison's party, but she also clearly wanted me gone. You can't just show up here. Actually, I can, I said, still smiling. I'm still legally half owner of this property, and you did post that all were welcome. But don't worry, I'm not staying long. Eli reached me then, and he didn't hesitate. Just wrapped me in a hug right there in front of everyone. I'm glad you came. Me too, bud. I turned to Madison, who was still standing by the cake like a deer in headlights. I walked over, pulled a small wrapped box from my pocket. I prepared this, because I'm not a complete monster, and held it out to her. Congratulations on graduating. I know things are complicated, but I did help raise you for 3 years. That has to count for something. She took the box slowly, like she thought it might explode. What is it? Open it. She unwrapped it carefully while everyone watched. Inside was a small compact mirror. Nothing fancy, just a simple mirror in a nice case. What's this for? I looked her right in the eyes. For self-reflection. Try it sometime. You might learn something. The crowd. And there was definitely a crowd now. Everyone had stopped pretending they weren't watching. Made this collective gasp sound. That thing you hear in movies when someone says something shocking. Lydia's face went from pale to red. How dare you? How dare I what? Show up and give your daughter a graduation gift? Be civil? Exist. I turned to face her fully now, and I wasn't smiling anymore. You posted on Facebook that I was missing. You told everyone I'd abandoned my family. But the truth is, I left because staying was slowly killing me. And the fact that you never once considered that maybe, just maybe, giving someone a mug that says they're a disappointment on Father's Day might be hurtful, that says everything about why I left. It was a joke. Jokes are supposed to be funny, Lydia. That was just cruel dressed up as humor. People were pulling out phones now. Of course they were. This was going to be all over social media by tonight. Part of me should have cared, but honestly, I was done caring what people thought. I didn't come here to cause a scene, I said, my voice calmer now. I came to say congratulations to Madison, to show Eli that I'm still here for him, and to prove to myself that I'm not afraid of you anymore. Mission accomplished. I started walking toward the gate, and then I stopped. Turned back one more time. Oh, and Lydia, you might want to check with your lawyer before you try to come after me for any money. Mine says you don't have a case, but feel free to try. I've got time and documentation. Do you? The silence I left behind was louder than any argument could have been. I got in my truck, drove away, and smiled the entire way home. The fallout from the party was swift and, honestly, kind of beautiful in its chaos. By Sunday morning, my phone was blowing up. Eli had texted me. That was the most savage thing I've ever seen in real life. Mom's been pacing around the house all night. Tommy called to ask if I'd completely lost my mind or finally found it, which I thought was a pretty fair question. And then there were the messages from random numbers, people from the party, apparently, who'd gotten my contact info somehow and wanted to tell me they'd always thought Lydia was fake, and good for you for standing up for yourself. But the best part? The absolute cherry on top of this ridiculous Sunday, I decided to do what I do best, turn my life into content. That Sunday night, I sat down at my desk, set up my phone camera, and recorded what would become my most viewed video ever. Hey everyone, Jack here from Handy Truths. Today we're not talking about tools or home repairs. Today we're talking about something that broke me more than any busted pipe or stripped screw ever could. Today we're talking about the day my family gave me a mug for Father's Day that said, "World's biggest disappointment." I told the whole story. Not vindicatively. I didn't name names. didn't show faces, just told it honestly. The mug, the laughter, the leaving, the months of rebuilding, the journey from broken to better. And at the end, I held up the mug itself. This mug sits on my desk now. It holds my pens, not my pain. Because here's what I learned. When people label you as a disappointment, they're really telling you about their expectations, not your worth. They expected me to stay, to keep taking it, to keep being their punching bag disguised as just kidding around. And I disappointed them by choosing myself instead. I posted it with the title, World's Biggest Disappointment. The day my family gifted me freedom in a mug. It went viral. Not TikTok dance viral, but real people sharing real stories viral. Within 48 hours, it had 500,000 views. The comments section became this unexpected support group for people, mostly men, who'd been through similar situations. Same, brother. Left after 20 years of being the joke. My wife gave me a world's okayest husband shirt and meant it as an insult. I feel this. Sometimes leaving is the bravest thing you can do. News outlets picked it up. Local ones first, then regional. I did a few interviews, always keeping it classy, never mentioning Lydia or the kids by name. Just telling my story. The story of a guy who got knocked down and chose to get back up. And then, 2 weeks after the video went viral, I got an email that made me stare at my screen for a solid 5 minutes. From email protected. Subject, I'm sorry. I read your post. I watched your video. I didn't understand before. I'm sorry for the mug. I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry for not seeing what it was doing to you. I don't expect you to forgive me or want anything to do with me, but you deserve to know that I finally get it. You weren't the disappointment. We were disappointed in ourselves and took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I'm working on being better. I hope you're doing well. You seem happy in your videos. I'm glad. Madison, it wasn't a full apology. It didn't fix everything, but it was honest, and that was more than I'd ever gotten when I was living in that house. I wrote back, thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I hope you're doing well too. The offer for coffee is always open if you want to talk. She never took me up on it, but knowing she'd reached out, that she'd grown enough to recognize what had happened, that was enough. 6 months after leaving, I was in a better place than I'd been in years. The YouTube channel was thriving, 50,000 subscribers and growing. I'd started doing actual handyman work on the side, building a client base through word of mouth and my videos. I'd moved into a bigger apartment, one without the constant smell of pizza, though I kind of missed it. Eli and I still met every other Saturday. He'd decided on a college across the state, far enough from home to breathe, close enough to visit. I'd offered to help him move in when the time came, and he'd said yes without hesitation. The divorce papers had been filed. Lydia hadn't contested them, surprisingly. According to Jill, my lawyer, she'd realized that fighting would just make her look worse, especially after my video. Sometimes the court of public opinion is more powerful than actual court. And the mug? It still sat on my desk, holding pins and the occasional paper clip. People asked me in videos why I kept it, if it didn't just remind me of bad times. But here's the thing, it did remind me. It reminded me that I'd survived, that I'd taken the worst thing someone could give me and turned it into motivation, that their attempt to break me had actually freed me. Every morning, I'd grab a pen from that mug to write down my to-do list. And every morning, I'd smile, because I was living proof that you can be someone's disappointment and still be your own success story. They'd thought that mug would define me. They were right, just not in the way they'd intended. It defined the moment I chose myself. The moment I decided that being called a disappointment by people who didn't value me was better than being valued by people who only saw me as a joke. I was the world's biggest disappointment to them. But to myself, I was finally enough. And that, as it turned out, was the only opinion that really mattered.